Now we're going to look at managing powerful emotions in the present. Now everyone, as they grow and move through this life, are going to encounter social interactions and situations that are going to be emotionally painful. I wish that was not the case, but unfortunately it's the reality of living in a social context. It's true. Everyone will experience some emotional pain from coming into contact with others and also having social interactions. We are designed to have and experience emotions. Some will be pleasant, some unpleasant, some wonderful, and some very difficult to cope with. So now we are going to look at strategies to manage unpleasant and difficult emotions in our present, which we may encounter from time to time from our present day social interactions. So let's start with learning how to defend ourselves from emotional pain. The fact is, people can hurt others emotionally, and we can all be sensitive and vulnerable to being hurt by this. The most common way this tends to happen is with the words people use. I'm sure everyone watching this can recall a time when someone has said something which has been emotionally painful. Now, why do people cause other people emotional pain? Now, the answer is complex, and some possible explanations could be: they may not actually be aware that they are causing you any pain at all. They may have experienced people taking advantage of them when they were younger, and so are now being very defensive or even aggressive in order to try and protect themselves from being taken advantage of again. Maybe they were humiliated or made to feel stupid when they were younger, and they are now forceful and argumentative and even do that unfairly, so that they can avoid that earlier feeling of being humiliated or made to feel stupid. It could be an unhealthy way for people to deal with their own difficult emotions. We've heard the saying, hurt people hurt people. It could be the tall poppy syndrome. The very fact that you are doing well or being successful challenges their own sense of success, security and position. So if they can criticize or put you down or make you look not so successful, then they may feel better about themselves in comparison. This kind of hurtful behaviour shouldn't happen, and it's not fair, but the fact is it does, and it will happen. And if we are honest, we have probably done some of these or said some of these things to other people as well. It's a bit like the tortoise and the hard shell. You might experience hardness from a person, but it's not intended to hurt you. It's intended to protect them. Again, it's like the hedgehog. Some people may present as prickly and hurtful and even bristle, but it's not for the purpose of harming you. It's for the purpose of protecting them. So it's helpful to consider why a person is saying what they're saying or behaving in the way that they are. And consider, is their intention to really harm you, or is it really to protect themselves? It's important to be mindful about a person's negative behaviour can come from their own pain and damage, and therefore worth considering. Is it more appropriate and effective to respond by returning them pain for pain, or rather to respond with compassion and understanding and insight? Remember, both the tortoise and the hedgehog have soft underbellies. Their hardness and sharpness is not necessarily for attack, it's for their defense. I'm not saying you shouldn't protect yourself from their words or behaviors, because you should. The hardness and the sharpness are real, and you need to protect yourself. But you don't necessarily need to hurt them back, especially when they're just trying to defend themselves. Negative words and behaviors are also more likely to come from a person that you know at least reasonably well and have some regular contact with. It could be a husband, wife, parent, child, boss, friend, work colleague. So the reasons for why people perpetrate emotional harm are complex and varied, but what matters is that you know how to protect yourself and manage these difficult words and behaviours when they're directed towards you. Let's look at two scenarios which you may face, which have the potential to cause emotional harm. Learning to defend yourself emotionally is what's important here. First scenario, and this is an uncommon situation. It's where someone has been abusive and aggressive to you, they're saying hurtful and cruel things, and it is very clear that their intention is to harm you. This is a serious situation which is likely to be rare, but it's good to know how to handle and respond to this kind of behaviour if you ever find yourself being verbally abused by another person, which was unprovoked. A process to manage this could simply to firstly leave their company and don't talk to them until their behaviour has changed. Number 2, consider if you are going to actually see them again. If they spoke to you like that once, it could happen again. Remember, you can't control the actions of others, so it may be risky seeing them again. However, if you do, you may want to make it as safe as possible by establishing and communicating clear boundaries, such as if they raise their voice and say hurtful things to you again, that you will immediately leave. It may also be worth considering meeting them in a public place until you are confident that their behaviour has at least moderated and is safe. You may also consider letting them know how the last conversation affected you by letting them know when, describe their behaviour, how it made you feel, describe how it affected you, and what you would need to be different when you talk to them next time. Every situation is different. It may not always be wise or helpful to do this. It depends on the context and the people involved. Now the second scenario. This scenario is less serious and more common, and one that you are likely to experience many times. The scenario is when someone says something to you that you experience as hurtful. However, it may not have been intended to be. There may have been some truth in what they have said to you. It was not overly aggressive and their motives are uncertain. This is a common scenario for most people. So for this situation, the following applied process could be considered as helpful and useful. Number 1, try not to react in the moment. Push the pause button on your emotions by telling yourself this is just their opinion, it's not the truth or a statement of fact. Just because they are saying this does not make it right or true. This kind of thinking will help you to press the pause button on your emotions. Remember, what they are saying could be coming from their own hurt or damage or self-protection. Also remember, they haven't studied or done extensive research on you. They are not an expert on you. So what they are saying, it's just their opinion. It's not necessarily correct. They could well be wrong. They may not know you well enough to understand your motives and values to actually make an informed, accurate comment about you. It could also be about how they are feeling, their own strengths, or they may just be trying to get their own way. Remember, their opinions are just that. They are opinions, and they are theirs, not yours. So don't take them on board, as they don't belong to you. Now number 2, listen and hear them out, and if appropriate, let them know that you've heard them and understand their point of view and will consider what they have said. Number 3, take time out on your own and consider the things they actually said to you, asking yourself, is there any truth in what they are saying? Is there any learning here for you? Is there even just a little bit of what they said true? Decide what you agree with and why, and what you don't agree with and why. When you know what you agree with and why, and what you don't agree with and why, then choose what you will accept and take on board from what was said to you, and what you will not accept and reject from what was said to you as being wrong or incorrect. And then unpress your emotional pause button and let yourself feel based on your conclusion and your rationale. In this way, you will be controlling and influencing your own emotions rather than letting someone else control and influence your own emotions. Number 4, decide if you'll let the person know, if you will let them know your analysis and outcome. Sometimes it could make the situation worse or relationship worse, and it's sometimes better not to reveal your processing and analysis. It's really for you to manage your own emotions rather than for the other person. But every situation is different, and each situation should be considered on its own merits, whether this should be done or not. Number 5, then start living in a consistent way according to your rationale and not what they said to you. If you continue to feel bad about what was said to you, remind yourself of your rationale, knowing what you believe and why, and say it out loud to yourself to reinforce it. If you accept or take on board or change your behaviour based on what other people say to you, then essentially you are living under their control and will lose control of your emotional life. You'll become like an emotional puppet on a string, with other people pulling the strings and controlling and manipulating your emotions. It will be more difficult to also know who you are, because you are always adjusting who you are and how you feel based on the views and comments of other people, which means you're being controlled by them. You'll continue to remain vulnerable and unstable emotionally, and all this when they may just be dumping their own feelings on you or be incorrect in what they've said to you, or they might just be trying to control you and get their own way. I suggest you don't allow this to happen and take some personal control. Practice this applied process, which in summary is this. 1, listen and don't react. Pause your emotions. 2, possibly let them know that you have heard and understand their point of view. 3, take time on your own to analyse and make conclusions about what has been said to you. You may also choose to talk this through with a trusted person who can help you work it through. Number 4, when you know what you agree with and why, and what you don't agree with and why, accept this emotionally and mentally and start living according to this rationale. 5, if needed, just remind yourself of your rationale, knowing what you believe and why, and say it out loud in your mind, which can be really helpful to reinforce and strengthen your rationale and thus help to manage your feelings. You will find a helpful tool and applied process for doing this in your resource book called the Emotional Processing Worksheet. So in reality, it could be used like this. So this is an example of how the Emotional Processing Worksheet could work. Firstly, a person could identify what was either said or done to them that they found difficult emotionally. For this example, we'll imagine a person has been criticised and given negative feedback by an older family member who is saying that they are not being a good parent because they are not making sure that their 14-year-old daughter is always doing her homework. The person in response to this could identify their feelings as being hurt, angry and embarrassed. They could then evaluate what was said to them by considering, is there any truth or anything they could learn from what was said? For this example, they may conclude that they will look at what other parents do regarding homework and their own children, and also check in with teachers' expectations for homework. They could then decide what they agree with and why, and what they don't and why, and accept this emotionally and mentally. So in this scenario, it could be that they agree that homework is important to a level, as it is part of their child's education. They may choose to disagree with the child having to do homework every day, and also that it is all their responsibility as a parent to ensure that it gets done. This is because the teacher may not expect the student to do homework every day, and because they may want their child to learn to take ownership and responsibility for getting their homework done. They may also disagree with the assumption or inference that they are a bad parent or failing in some way, based on the family member's views. They may also agree that it is good to have input from a family member because they have a valuable relationship with their daughter and may have helpful advice to give. However, they may disagree with the family member's critical approach and negative tone used when giving their feedback, as this is not helpful to anyone. So in summary, they may choose to accept and reject the following. They could choose to agree with and accept that homework is important to a level and that family members have a right to their opinion and to give advice. They could also choose to disagree and reject that homework needs to be done every day, that it is all their responsibility to ensure that it gets done. And they could also reject the assumption or inference that they are a bad parent, and the negative and critical tone used by the family member as being unnecessary and unhelpful. And lastly, they could choose to feel positive and strong as a parent, having managed this challenge well, and feel good about their learnings, conclusions and conduct as a parent. They may not choose to change anything they are currently doing as their child's homework performance is within the teacher's expectations, and choose to accept that the family member has a right to their opinion, which they conclude as incorrect in this situation. And while they found the negative and critical way the family member gave their feedback is difficult, they can now let go of those emotions like hurt and anger and embarrassment based on their rationale, and accept that it's just their opinion and that it probably came from a place of wanting the best for their daughter. They may also choose not to confront the family member about their negative feedback to them, because they could predict that this is probably not going to change their behaviour anyway, and that they would struggle with the confrontation, which could overall weaken relationships without any benefit. So that's just an example of how the emotional processing worksheet could work. Now you could use it to manage a current situation which you are finding emotionally difficult. It is good to understand that when a person has been hurtful towards you and that you don't respond in a hurtful way back and don't change your view or behaviour, this can be a very powerful response, and it's often very disarming and disempowering of their behaviour towards you, particularly if their motives were to control or hurt you. By doing this, you take away the purpose or function of their words, and thus it is less likely that they will do it again, as it was just not effective for them. So you have a choice to make. It's either going to be you or others that are going to control and influence your emotional life. The process that we have outlined is not an easy one, and it takes commitment and practice, but with time it will really help for you to have control of your own emotions. Now, if you feel you need more than this program right now, you can call one of the numbers on the screen for someone to talk to.